Research tracking couples through unemployment found something that no one wanted to publish at first. In relationships where the man lost his job, measurable drops in the woman's physical desire appeared within 60 to 90 days. Not because the money was gone, because of something the researchers did not initially expect to find. If you have ever felt your desire for a partner change during a period of unemployment and then felt deeply ashamed of yourself for it, this video is for you. Not because your body is superficial, because what is happening inside you is one of the most documented and least discussed patterns in relationship psychology. We are going to go through the specific mechanism behind this, the timeline that most people find disturbing when they first hear it, the real distinction between couples who survive this dynamic and those who do not, and what your body is actually responding to when it responds this way. By the end of this, you will not just understand why desire fades in this situation, you will understand why the timeline is exactly what it is, and what that precision tells you about the nature of attraction itself. It rarely starts with a fight. It starts with a shift in the texture of daily life. He is home more, you are working more. The conversations change in ways that are hard to name. What used to feel like partnership begins to feel like imbalance. You find yourself tracking things you never used to track before. How many hours he spent on the couch today, how many applications he sent this week, whether he made dinner, whether the house was in order, whether he seems to be taking this seriously. You become the monitor of a situation you did not ask to manage. And quietly, without intending to, without making any conscious decision, you begin to see him differently. The attraction does not disappear in a sudden dramatic moment. It retreats. In the same way water recedes from a shoreline before a tide goes out, it pulls back so gradually that you almost do not notice, until one evening you are lying next to the person you built your life with, and you realize that the wanting is simply no longer there. Not the love, necessarily, not the shared history, not even the care. Just the wanting. And the absence of that wanting is accompanied by a guilt so heavy that you cannot speak it out loud. You tell yourself that you are a good person, that good people do not lose desire for their partners because circumstances got hard, that if you were really committed, you would feel differently. You rehearse sentences in your mind that you never say. I am not angry that you lost your job. I know this is not your fault. I am still here and I am not going anywhere. And every one of those sentences is true. None of them changes what your body is doing. Here is where the disturbing part begins. A 2018 longitudinal study published in the Journal of Family Psychology followed 168 dual-income couples through a job loss event. The researchers were tracking relationship satisfaction, emotional connection, and physical intimacy over a 12-month period. What they found in the first 3 months was not what they had predicted. Within the first 60 to 90 days, 64% of the women reported a measurable decline in physical attraction to their partner. Not a decline in love, not a decline in commitment. A specific, identifiable decline in physical desire. By the 6-month mark, that number had climbed to 79%. And here is the detail that made the researchers pause. The women who reported the highest levels of emotional support for their partners were not showing lower rates of desire decline. The support was real. The attraction loss was also real. Both were happening simultaneously, inside the same women, in the same bodies. The researchers initially assumed that financial stress alone was driving the result, but when they controlled for income loss, isolating couples where the financial impact was comparable but the behavioral response was different, the financial stress variable alone did not explain the variance. The predictor that mattered most was not how much money was lost. It was what the man did in the days and weeks after the money was lost. If you did not know that distinction existed, you are probably not subscribed yet. Subscribe, because next week we go deeper into the attachment dynamics that emerge from exactly this pattern, and you are going to want to see that. To understand why the timeline is this specific, you need to understand how female desire is wired at a neurobiological level. Unlike male desire, which is primarily triggered by visual and physical cues, female desire is deeply tied to what researchers call resource security and directional security. The brain structures involved in desire are in constant communication with the systems that assess environmental threat. Financial instability is registered by the nervous system as a threat, regardless of whether the conscious mind has decided to accept and support the partner through it. What this means in practice is that your body begins responding to the unemployment before your mind has fully processed what it means. The cortisol levels associated with financial stress do not distinguish between supported stress and unsupported stress. The vigilance response that financial uncertainty activates is the opposite neurological state of the relaxation and safety that female desire requires to emerge. Desire is a state that only becomes available when the nervous system is not in survival mode. And financial uncertainty reliably activates survival mode, regardless of how consciously you have decided to handle it with grace. But here's the part that most relationship researchers do not talk about, because it is uncomfortable for everyone involved. The financial dimension of unemployment does not just affect the nervous system in isolation. It changes the relational dynamic in a way that directly replicates the motherhood trap described in research on emotional labor and marital desire. When a man loses his job and does not immediately step into an alternative active role in the household, a quiet transfer of responsibility occurs. The woman is now managing the income, the financial planning, the household logistics, and often the emotional atmosphere of a partner who is processing his own shame and loss. She is not just working harder in one area. She is expanding her management portfolio to include a territory that used to belong to him. Psychologists studying long-term desire in couples have found that one of the most reliable predictors of sustained attraction is the perception of mutual and distinct contribution. Each partner brings something the other does not fully carry. Each person has a domain of competence and responsibility that makes them an asset to the relationship. When that complementarity collapses, when the woman finds herself absorbing both her own territory and his, the brain begins to reclassify the relationship. He is no longer perceived as an equal contributor. And you cannot desire someone you have reclassified. The attraction system does not operate independently of the classification system. They share the same infrastructure. What the research found next is something most relationship researchers do not say out loud because it implicates both partners in a way that is uncomfortable for everyone. The exhaustion that goes beyond financial pressure. The specific kind of loneliness that comes from managing a life that should have two stewards but only has one who is fully engaged. When men experience shame around unemployment, and research consistently shows that they do, the behavioral response to that shame tends to make the attraction problem significantly worse in ways that are almost counterintuitive. The first pattern is withdrawal. The man who is ashamed of his situation often pulls back emotionally. He becomes quieter, less engaged, less present. He may spend more time alone, more time on screens, more time in a kind of suspended passivity that communicates, even if he does not intend it to, that he has stopped trying. This withdrawal reads to the woman's nervous system as the exact opposite of the directed effort and forward movement that her desire needs to perceive. The second pattern is defensiveness. Some men, rather than withdrawing, become hypervigilant about being perceived as inadequate. They interpret any conversation about household contributions or the job search as a personal attack. They respond to practical questions with emotional escalation. This pattern is equally damaging because it removes the woman's ability to have honest conversations without triggering conflict. She begins to manage what she says, protecting him from the reality of the impact. And when a woman starts managing her communication to protect a man from his own emotional reactions, she has become, in a very precise sense, his parent. That reclassification happens silently, and its effect on desire is immediate. I want to ask you directly, have you ever been inside this silence? Have you ever carried resentment for a partner's unemployment while also carrying the guilt of carrying that resentment? Tell me in the comments. Because the people who need to read your answer are right now sitting somewhere feeling like they are the only person who has ever felt this way. What I'm about to tell you is something most relationship content refuses to say because it is uncomfortable for everyone involved. The resentment that builds when a woman becomes the sole financial provider is not a sign that she is unsupportive. It is a mathematical consequence of sustained, unacknowledged imbalance. Every morning she wakes up and goes to work while he does not. A small deposit of imbalance enters the account. Every bill she pays alone, every financial decision she navigates alone, every moment of economic stress she absorbs without a partner who is actively reducing it. Each one adds to the balance. This account does not announce itself. It does not send notifications. It simply grows, quietly, until one day the woman looks at the person sitting across from her and realizes that what she feels toward him has fundamentally changed. The cruelest part of this dynamic is the timing. By the time the resentment becomes visible, it has typically been accumulating for months. The conversations that could have changed the trajectory have already not happened, and the man, who often has no idea how much has been silently accumulating, experiences the woman's emotional withdrawal as sudden and inexplicable. He did not see it coming because she had never said it was coming. She had never said it because she felt guilty for feeling it. The guilt that operates inside this dynamic is one of its most effective mechanisms of concealment. The woman who is losing desire during her partner's unemployment has usually accepted a story about what kind of person she should be in this situation. A good partner supports. A good partner does not abandon. She has internalized the idea that her attraction should be unconditional, that real love transcends circumstances, and that if she were truly committed, none of this would be happening. This story is not only false, it is actively harmful to both partners. Because the version of attraction that is genuinely unconditional does not exist. Desire has always had conditions. It has conditions in the early stages of a relationship when it depends on novelty and tension. It has conditions in the middle stages when it depends on respect and complementarity. And it has conditions during crisis, when it depends on visible effort and direction. Pretending that those conditions do not exist does not make the relationship stronger. It just ensures that the honest conversation never happens. When the woman cannot say what she is experiencing because she has decided it makes her a bad person to experience it, two things occur. First, the distance between her internal reality and her external presentation widens. She becomes increasingly performed, increasingly managed, increasingly absent from the relationship even while physically present. Second, the man loses access to the information he needs to change the dynamic. He cannot respond to a problem he has not been told exists. The silence that protects him from discomfort is the same silence that guarantees the outcome he is most afraid of. The couples who successfully navigate unemployment without losing the core of their relational attraction share a specific set of behaviors that research identifies with remarkable consistency, and the most important of those behaviors belongs to the man. What preserves attraction during male unemployment is not finding a new job quickly. It is the quality of the man's engagement with the situation while the job is not yet found. Specifically, it is the combination of visible effort and honest communication. The man who sends applications, takes calls, pursues retraining, and then talks to his partner about what he did that day, what worked, what did not, and what he plans to try next is communicating something that the woman's nervous system reads very clearly. He is communicating that he has not stopped being a person in motion. He is still directing. He is still contributing to the forward movement of the shared life, even in the absence of income. The man who takes over household domains he can control, who ensures that the domestic management load does not fall entirely on his employed partner, who structures his own time as if his job is currently finding a job, is doing something far more important than any single act of support. He is preventing the reclassification. He is maintaining his identity as an active contributor to the relationship. And as long as that identity is maintained, the conditions that desire needs have a fighting chance of surviving. If a man responds to this period with passive waiting, emotional withdrawal, or defensiveness when the subject is raised, the problem is not his unemployment. The problem is a fundamental mismatch between how he sees his responsibility during difficulty and what the relationship actually needs from him to remain emotionally alive. If someone in your life is living exactly this and does not have the language for what they are experiencing, send them this video. Let it speak for them before they have to. Because one of the cruelest parts of this dynamic is the isolation it creates. The woman feels too guilty to discuss it. The man is too ashamed to invite the discussion, and they both circle the silence until one of them runs out of reasons to stay inside it. In the end, the woman who is losing desire for her unemployed partner is facing a question that no one prepared her to ask honestly. She has been taught to evaluate the relationship by whether her partner is fundamentally good and fundamentally committed. She has not been taught to evaluate whether the specific pattern of his engagement during difficulty is compatible with the conditions her body needs to remain attracted. Those are not the same question. And confusing them is the source of a great deal of unnecessary suffering on both sides. I will leave you with this. If you were to assess not the person your partner is at his best, but the person he is revealing himself to be under pressure, when the external structure falls away and what remains is entirely his own character and choices, would you choose to build a life around that version of him? There is no right answer. There is only an honest one. And if you are not sure what that honest answer is, that uncertainty itself is telling you something you should probably hear. The most disturbing part of the research is not the timeline, it is the consistency. Across culture, age, income level, and relationship length, the pattern repeats. What changes the outcome is not whether the unemployment happens, it is what happens after. What pattern in this video did you recognize from your own life? Drop it in the comments, because I want to know what part of this you needed to hear most, and could not say out loud until now. There is a pattern that relationship therapists call the invisible audit. When a woman is the sole financial provider, she does not just track the money, she tracks the behavior. She notices how he spends his time, whether he seems motivated, whether he is treating the job search with the seriousness she would treat it if their roles were reversed. This auditing behavior is not voluntary. It is automatic. The brain, having identified a resource threat, begins monitoring the source of that threat for signs of resolution. Every hour he spends unemployed without visible evidence of effort is registered not just as information, but as evidence. Evidence that is weighed, however unconsciously, against the conditions her attraction needs to survive. The audit does not stop when she goes to bed. It does not pause while they are having dinner. It runs in the background of every interaction, coloring every exchange with a low-level awareness of the imbalance that the interaction is not addressing. This is why surface-level romantic gestures from the unemployed partner tend to backfire. When a man who has spent the day on the couch plans an elaborate dinner or attempts to initiate intimacy, the woman's nervous system does not respond to the gesture in isolation. It responds to the gesture in context. And the context is the audit. She knows what the day looked like. She knows that the dinner was planned in a gap between video games. The effort required to cook a meal is real, and she can see it, but it exists inside a frame that has already been registered. The gesture lands not as evidence of direction and investment, but as a substitution, an attempt to replace the kind of effort she actually needs to see with the kind of effort that is more immediately rewarding to him. And her body knows the difference. What the research consistently shows is that women in this dynamic do not need perfection from their partners. They do not need the unemployment to end immediately. They need to see that the man they are partnered with is the kind of person who remains engaged and directional even when the outcome is uncertain. That quality, that specific quality of remaining in motion without guarantee of reward, is precisely what the female nervous system reads as masculine value in a long-term partner. It is not about income. It is about identity under pressure. And the partners who communicate that quality during unemployment are the ones who find the relationship intact when the income eventually returns.